Hi everyone. The next unit we're going to be working on for English 10 is poetry. And so as an introduction to the unit, we're going to be going over some poetry terms. There's 20 terms total, and while watching this, you should also be taking a look at your the handout that you have, and you can print that out. You can also work on it on your iPad through Notability with the PDF attachment if you want, and so you can certainly bounce between screens. And I would suggest kind of pausing this video as you're working on your definitions. But you're going to complete the vocabulary, the poetic terms, terminology handout, and you're going to submit that via Google Classroom. So us going over these terms is a way for you to work on that. It's a way to also kind of explain it and hopefully give you a little bit more detail about how those terms work. And then ultimately next week on Monday, which I believe is April the 6th, we'll take a short quiz, pretty much look similar to the vocabulary quizzes that we've done on Google Classroom, where we'll be going over those poetry terms. So I'll try to explain some things in a little bit more detail. Certainly any questions that you have, you can send me an email or remind, and I'll try to explain things hopefully a little bit better for you if need be. And also remember that we do have office hours on Wednesday. Which for is today, if you're watching this video, at which you could go over some things as well with me, or you can always make an appointment to go over some things as well. All right, so we're going to run through our poetry terms here. So the first one we're going to take a look at is meter, and this has nothing to do with the measurement, as a meter when it comes to the metric system. But meter here is essentially looking at a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables and then kind of line of poetry. So it's similar to like rhythm that would be in music. There's a beat, there's a consistent pattern that is going on with it. You can see next to stressed and unstressed, I have a slash here, and really is like a little U, but it's called a cup. The slash and the cup are used to identify which syllables in a word are stressed or unstressed. So I have the example or the picture here of a line of music to kind of illustrate the connection that would be happening here, where meter is literally just the rhythm that is going on within a poem. A lot of traditional poems, and Dr. Seuss also would be an example of this, of poems do have meter to them, but not all poetry has to have meter in order for it to be considered a poem, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So basically the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry is meter. So there is a pattern, there's a replication that is happening where you keep repeating the same type of combination of stressed and unstressed syllables in poetry. And really the next 5 slides here, next 5 terms are all going to be types of meter that exist after this following term, which is a foot. A foot is not the thing attached to your ankle, but a foot is a singular metrical unit in a poem. So it's a part of the pattern that essentially tends to repeat over and over and over again. So last year in 9th grade, if you read any William Shakespeare, might have talked about his plays and his poetry, his sonnets being written in iambic pentameter. That would be the foot. So that would be the pattern that was happening. So you find a unit, a pattern of the stressed and unstressed syllables, and they tend to be either 2 or 3 syllables total, and then that pattern just simply repeats. So feet make up the overall meter. All right, so kind of think of this as a building block towards that overall meter that would exist within a poem. So meter is the pattern, foot is going to be one of those units that helps kind of create that pattern. For your quiz that we end up doing, you are not going to be required to know which words would be iambic or trochaic and anapestic, dactylic, spondaic, which are the type of feet, but you have to know the pattern in the sense of the unstressed, stressed. So for iambic, that means it's a 2-syllable foot. So the first syllable is unstressed and the second syllable is stressed. And when we say unstressed, stressed, we don't necessarily mean the volume in which a person would say it, but kind of like the emphasis that's going to be placed on it. So if you take a look at the word insist, when people say insist, both syllables are obviously pronounced, but there's more emphasis being placed on that second syllable, that sist part. So I'm insisting that this happens. Or do you feel like you belong to a group? Or I'm going to predict that I will do well on my quiz. So those are all examples of iambic words where that second syllable is getting stressed. Now, a foot doesn't have to be just one word that's 2 syllables. It could be 2 words that are 1 syllable, and you could also have longer words where multiple syllables, but you're kind of repeating an overall pattern. Iambic's kind of like a heartbeat, da-dum, 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 when your heart is beating. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. So iambic is only 2 syllables, unstressed, stressed. Insist, belong, predict. The next one, trochaic, is going to be the opposite. So it's still 2 syllable, but instead of being unstressed, stressed, this one is going stressed, unstressed. So, hello, how are you? Hello. For ice cream, do you want a single scoop or do you want a double scoop? Sometimes I feel like I am languishing. So the emphasis, and this can certainly change depending upon how a word is getting used or the way it's trying to be done in a poem, but the emphasis is getting now placed on the first syllable within those words. Hello, double, languish. So those are considered to be trochaic. So iambic, unstressed, stressed. Trochaic, opposite, that's going to be a stressed, unstressed. Again, 2 syllables. Now things get a little bit more complicated because we're now coming here into anapestic. And so this is going to be a 3-syllable foot where the pattern is now going to be unstressed, unstressed, stressed. So the term poetry, 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 contradict, contradict, understand, understand. More emphasis is here being placed on the end, poetry, contradict, understand. Unstressed, unstressed, stressed. All right. So this one can be a little bit more complex because certainly the words can end up being a little bit longer, but sometimes it can also be difficult to find multiple words. You know, if you're just using shorter words where you get that unstressed, unstressed, then leading up into that stress. And again, this is how rhythm is. So you want to think of meter as kind of like how a song would work, and the feet are kind of part of the beat here that kind of create that overall rhythm that would be going on. Anapestic is going to be a da 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 dum da da dum. So unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Again, we're going to have an opposite. So dactylic is now, it's again still 3 syllables, but this one is going to be stressed, unstressed, unstressed. So there's more emphasis being placed at the beginning of the word. You know, excellent, excellent, humanly, humanly, or wonderful, wonderful. And some words you're going to kind of be able to pick it out a little bit better than others. And the way that some people pronounce words are going to be a little bit different. The way that they enunciate them can be different from other folks. So while, you know, a word might naturally be dactylic for one person, it could, you know, be anapestic for another. And that's why you're not going to have to match up specific words, examples like excellent with dactylic, but you do need to be able to remember the stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Stressed, unstressed, unstressed. That's what you'll be matching up with dactylic. The opposite, the unstressed, unstressed, stressed, is what you would be matching up with anapestic. The last one, and this one's a little bit different. It is only 2 syllables. Both syllables are stressed. And this type doesn't get used very often within poetry. When it is done, it's usually done for an effect. But this really works with compound words. So if you have a word like football, scoreboard, popcorn, snowball, all of these things, all of the syllables in these words get equal emphasis. And that works because they're compound words, so it's one word being made up of smaller words. This doesn't work as well when it comes to traditional words with prefixes, suffixes, and things like that. So spondaic is stressed, stressed. So you could have a poem that is anapestic throughout, and then at the end of lines, maybe it ends up kind of going with a spondaic meter so that it's really stressing specific parts. All right. So again, for these 5 terms, I just need you to know the pattern of the syllables. I don't need you to worry about which sample words would fit in with them. All right. All right, next term we're looking at here is scanning. And scanning is the process of identifying a poem's meter. So you're indicating the stressed and unstressed syllables. So scanning is not part of a poem, but it's actually an action. So you're taking a look at the poem and you're going through and marking which syllables are going to be stressed, which syllables are going to be unstressed, and then you're figuring out the meter. We're not actually going to be scanning poems ourselves, but the term scanning doesn't mean you're looking for meaning within the poem, but it means you're literally trying to identify what is the pattern of syllables that's going on within that specific poem. So just want you to be familiar with that term. So again, scanning, process of identifying a poem's overall meter. All right, mentioned to you that when we're taking a look at the term meter, that a poem doesn't have to have meter in order for it to be considered a poem. In poetry, really, you get a lot of freedom to do a lot of kind of different things. Free verse is just a poem that does not have a set meter scheme. So there's this poem that I have an example of here by Carl Sundberg entitled Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent hotches and then moves on. You got a metaphor going on here where fog's being compared to a cat, but you can see when it is read, there isn't that meter to it. It doesn't have like that song-like quality. You have a different syllable count that would be going on with the lines, and there's also different syllables that are going to be stressed when they are being pronounced. So free verse still considered a poem, but it's simply a poem that does not have a set meter scheme to it. All right, extended metaphor, and this is going to be when a poem that is built around one central metaphor, and a lot of times the whole entire poem will be the metaphor. You also could have a stanza within a lengthier poem that ends up being built around a comparison. So the poem that we just had before with fog would work because you have fog being compared to a cat. Here we have a metaphor going on with the poem entitled Paper. A piece of paper is a baby, blank and unfurled, untouched by the world. A piece of paper is a possibility, able to be anything, ready to sing. A piece of paper is a responsibility, capable of hurt, happy to disconcert. So you have this extended metaphor where paper is being compared to multiple things. It's a baby, it's possibility, it's responsibility. The whole entire poem is going to be considered, being an extended metaphor, even though there's multiple metaphors because each stanza ends up being its own. But there's not that there is a isolated metaphor taking place. The whole entire structure of the poem was built around the concept of metaphor, and that's what makes it being an extended metaphor. And the comparison is the same thing where we're taking a look at paper and then that's being compared to other concepts within. Personification we know is a type of metaphor. Personification is going to be a metaphor that gives objects, I have double objects here, excuse me, that gives objects human-like qualities. So the idea with this is not that the whole entire poem has to be an example of personification, but that you have personification within a poem. Now, you could have an extended metaphor where personification is being utilized, but for our purposes, personification is just going to be that metaphor that gives objects human-like qualities. So you could have something like in this first image here where the breeze is whistling as it goes through the trees and the plants and the vegetation. If you go to the beach, you talk about the waves were jumping up and down, or the waves are really brutal that particular day. You're giving human-like qualities to inanimate objects. Some will argue that you can give human-like qualities to animals and it can still be considered personification. Technically, that is another term, but for our cases, I'm going to consider basically giving human-like qualities to any non-human entity, whether that be an object, whether that be an animal, or whatever have you. So a metaphor that gives objects human-like qualities is going to be our example of personification. So those were some examples of figurative language. Now we're going to take a look at different types of rhyme. And probably one of the more common types of rhyme that exists within poetry is end rhyme. End rhyme is when you have a poem where the words at the end of multiple lines of poetry rhyme. And so, as I said, this is going to be fairly traditional. So I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So at the end of the lines, I have cloud and crowd rhyming. I have hills and daffodils, and then I have trees and breeze. So because I have my rhyming words at the end of the lines, that's where I'm going to have a specific kind of end rhyme. What we also tend to do is designate each rhyme a specific letter. So the first word at the end is cloud, and then any other word that rhymes with cloud at the end of a line is also going to receive the letter A. The second rhyming pair is hills and daffodils. So my poem starts off with an A, B rhyme scheme, where the A's rhyme and the B's rhyme, and they're alternating. This changes a little bit because I get a couplet here at the end where trees and breeze rhyme. So if we were identifying an overall rhyme scheme for this particular poem, we would be able to say that this poem has a B, C rhyme scheme. If I were to have a poem where I wanted it to be I wanted to be A, B, C, C, this would simply mean that I'm going to be having pairs of rhyming lines that are going to be consecutively. So they're going to be couplets. So every two lines would rhyme with one another. Rhyme scheme is very similar to meter, where it's basically a pattern that would be going on. So in this case, as I said, A B A B C C. But end rhyme literally just means that it's going to be words that are going to be rhyming at the end of multiple lines of poetry. Internal rhyme is essentially going to be what it sounds like. Rather than words rhyming at the end of a line of poetry, or in addition to words rhyming at the end of the line of poetry, I'm going to have words that are going to be rhyming within the same line, internally. So multiple words that rhyme within the same line of poetry. And for a poem to have internal rhyme, it doesn't have to be happening in every single line of the poem. So we take a look here with Edgar Allan Poe. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down on my side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. So I have examples of internal rhyme within Edgar Allan Poe's Annabel Lee, where not every single line is going to have internal rhyme, but I have multiple words, in this case two, multiple words rhyming in multiple lines of poetry. And you can even see that I have a little bit of a combination of an end rhyme and a internal rhyme, with night tide and side internal rhyme, and then side and bride also rhyming as an example of end rhyme. So you can certainly have some crossover effect with the different types of rhyming that would be happening within a poem. Exact rhyme, and this is also called true rhyme. This occurs when words in a poem truly rhyme. So there is an exact, precise rhyme. So hat, cat, Sam, ham, those words rhyme. It's not that you have to manipulate the way that you say the word or pronounce the word, or it's not that they almost rhyme, but these are all words that absolutely, truly do rhyme. So exact rhyme can be internal or end rhyme, but literally would just mean that words exactly rhyme with one another. There's not any kind of variation that has to be made to the way the word sounds in order to get it to rhyme, or it's not that the words are very close to rhyming and we accept it as such, but they exactly do rhyme. Slant rhyme is also called approximate rhyme, where this is when you do have words in a poem that are considered to be rhyming, but they don't necessarily truly rhyme. So if I say the word name and I say the word lane, the M sound and the N sound are clearly different. But when the word's pronounced, especially with that long A vowel, the M and the N are close enough that we consider it to be a rhyming word. Or stand and man. You have that D sound at the end of stand, but when you say stand, in a lot of cases that D isn't really heavily emphasized. So within a poem, within a song, you could say stand and man do rhyme, even though we know that's not truly the case. And really with music, you tend to have a lot of slant rhyme. And I think in a lot of cases people appreciate slant rhyme because it can be somewhat of an art to take some words that might not truly rhyme, but the way that they're being pronounced, the way that they're being sung, the way that they're being presented allows for that rhyme to take place. So an exact rhyme is a true rhyme. The words actually do rhyme. For a slant rhyme, you're looking at words where they almost rhyme and they're close enough that no one is really going to argue that those words are not rhyming. Masculine rhyme is also sometimes called simple rhyme, and this is when you only have one syllable of each word rhymes, and generally that's going to be the last syllable within a word. So it could be one syllable words such as hat and cat, or it could be two or more syllable words like confess and redress. So confess, redress, they rhyme because you have that ESS sound going on in both, and hat and cat is pretty obvious. And it's not that they're not good rhyming words, but they're just considered masculine, a simple form of rhyme. It's not something that's overly complicated or sophisticated. So one syllable of each word rhymes. You contrast this with feminine rhyme, and that's considered a more sophisticated rhyme where multiple syllables of each word rhymes. So, you could have a two-syllable words like power and flower. Both the OW and the ER sound obviously rhyme. Power, flower. You could even have ones where you have more syllables than two. Cafeteria, hysteria. You have three syllables within both of those words that are rhyming. So a lot of folks within, probably especially I'd say modern music within songs, really try to do a lot of feminine rhyme because it's more complex, it's a little bit trickier, and so it's something that gains a little bit more recognition of being sophisticated and difficult to do. So excuse me, again, both types of rhyme are certainly valid, and I'm not trying to argue that one's better than the other, but masculine rhyme, simple rhyme, one syllable. When you have feminine rhyme, it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more sophisticated. You have at least two syllables that would be rhyming with those words. And it's not that within a poem you have to designate that everything's going to be a masculine rhyme or everything's going to be a feminine rhyme. Those things tend to kind of go back and forth. And certainly when we start writing some poetry, I would expect that most of our rhymes will be masculine because those are the ones that you kind of think of, off the top of your head. All right, another form, not of rhyme, but another sound element that gets incorporated quite a lot into poetry is going to be alliteration, and certainly a term that we've heard and used before, repetition of the same consonant sound at the beginning of words within the same line of poetry. And so if you think of like tongue twisters, Sally sells seashells down by the seashore, or Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, those would all be really good examples of alliteration. And really when you're using alliteration, you're trying to emphasize specific words within that line of poetry. I would say usually 3 words is a good example with alliteration happening. You could have 2 words with alliteration, occurring within a poem, but if you're really trying to emphasize something, you probably have that sound happening about 3 times within a line of poetry. And again, it doesn't mean that every single line within that poem is going to have 3 examples of alliteration, but at certain points you're just emphasizing a quality, a concept within your poem. So alliteration, repetition of that constant sound at the beginning of words within the same line of poetry. Alliteration is only going to be at the beginning. Onomatopoeia, a word which imitates the natural sound of a thing that it's trying to be. So, comic books, you think of pow, zap, things like that. And then have a picture of Buzz Lightyear here, with Buzz certainly being an example of onomatopoeia. So a word, the spelling of the word, the pronunciation of the word imitates the natural sound that it is trying to replicate. And then the last one that we're going to be taking a look at, and this would also kind of be considered figurative language when we were taking a look at personification and metaphor, but it's a little bit different, hyperbole. So it's the use of exaggeration for dramatic effect. So you're exaggerating something, but you're really trying to get a quality across. So, you'll hear about fish tales where people claim to have, caught a fish this big, and it's really just like a little minnow or a little perch that was caught. Someone might hit a home run and claim that home run was going through clouds. It was soaring so high, it was going over 5-story buildings and things like that. It's not that you're literally trying to make someone believe it, but you're trying to exaggerate the truth a little bit just so they understand how big of a deal that this truly was. All right, so this was us going over those 20 terms. Again, you have your handout, your sheet, to write down the definitions. Remember, any of the words in that handout that are underlined, that means that there's going to be an example that you're going to have to match up. So it's not just knowing what the definition is, but it would be kind of understanding how examples will work. And so you want to be there's not specific examples that you have to know, but you want to be able to kind of recognize when those types of figurative language or whatever are being utilized. Your copy of those notes you're going to submit to me via Google Classroom. You'll just attach under your work to the assignment. You can write, as I said, on that PDF in Notability if you want, or if you just want to take a screenshot, a picture of you handwriting the terms, I'm perfectly fine with that as well. Just make sure if you do the screenshot that it's legible so that I can actually see it. But just reattach those things back into Google Classroom, so you'll get the credit for that. And then Monday of next week is when we will do our matching quiz on these terms, matching / multiple choice. So just be prepared for that. Also, remember, this Friday, April 3rd, is when your Fahrenheit 451 research paper is due, so make sure you're looking over those things. And the rest of this week, we're going to continue to kind of do a little bit of work with poetry. You're going to be reading the poem Wheels and completing what's called a TP cast for that. So I'll be explaining that process in one of our upcoming videos. Hope everyone's doing well. Stay safe, and let me know if you have any questions. Take care.